podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Social Media Derby. We've got a great episode this week. I'm going to be talking a lot about international football. Obviously the Euros are just around the corner. We've also got Copa America predictions. And then obviously, Man United and Arsenal podcast. We're going to chat about the latest transfer news, some talking points around the managers. But before we get into that, for those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop your comments down below, share the video if you can. For those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review, share it with your mates, just help with any kind of engagement. Everything is appreciated. Let's get into the pod then, Jonts. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. How about you?
Yeah, feeling a bit rough. I don't know if I've got a cold or something, but yeah, a bit under the weather. I know you were saying you were feeling similar as well. I don't know if it's just that kind of season before we properly get into the summer. There's a couple of bugs flying about or something, but yeah, definitely felt better before. All right, let's get into the transfers then, Jonts. United have been linked with Xerxes from Bologna this week. I think you guys have also been linked with them as well. 40 million euro release clause, had a really good season in Bologna, been linked with a bunch of clubs around Europe. Other clubs in Italy, I think, have been linked with him, as well as Bayern Munich, where he used to play. On the outs, a lot of chat around Jadon Sancho this week. Dortmund have been saying that basically they can't afford his, I think we're looking for £50 million or euros for a permanent deal. They can't afford that in addition to his hefty wages, so they're talking about another loan deal. On Arsenal's side, in addition to Xerxes, you've also been linked with Solanke from Bournemouth and Douglas Luiz from Aston Villa. 2 Prem-proven players, so, pretty solid links, I think. Both improve the team, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And on the outs, kind of a bit of a forgotten man, Kieran Tierney's been linked with moves to Newcastle and Aston Villa. And a bit of a shock link for Takahiro Tomiyasu, heading back to Italy, linked with Napoli. Antonio Conte's Napoli now. So yeah, we'll get into those transfers. First of all, John, are you happy with being linked with the Inns, Solanke and Douglas Luiz, or are you looking for? I know we discussed other strikers in the previous pod, but would you be happy with those guys if they came in?
I think I'd be happy with Douglas Luiz depending on the fee, and then I think for Solanke, I'm not. It seems like a second, third option for me in terms of who we're going for. Like if we're going to go for Sesko, if we're going to go for Isak, those kinds of players. Obviously, it seems like Isak is pretty much out of the picture now, but I would still prefer probably Sesko over Solanke just in terms of youth. And I know that we need to balance between buying players in their prime versus players that are about to approach their prime. But in this case, for the striking position, I feel like I would like to see a younger striker come in just because I'm not really happy with the young striker option that we have right now. And I know maybe it doesn't lend itself to like going and winning the Premier League next year or something like that, and you probably want the player in form for that kind of thing. But I have a feeling that we can get more out of Sesko and get him to a place where he could be part of a Prem winning team in terms of goal contributions. So, I mean, it's a toss-up between Solanke and Sesko. I mean, I still would prefer Sesko, but for Solanke, it really will depend on the fee. Because the other issue that we've got with him is that it's coming from a Premier League team. He's English, and there's going to be issues with, people overvaluing him based off his contributions last season. So I'm not all that happy with that one, but I knew it was going to happen at some point, right? We're going to be looking at different options, and Solanke was going to be one of them, but he's not necessarily the one that I want to end up with. For Douglas Luiz, again, we've been linked with him for so long now. I think I've probably talked about this with a lot of different Arsenal fans, and they're all, based off his form last season and his just general quality, they are relatively happy with having him at the club. But again, it's going to depend on the fee because he's coming from Aston Villa, who've just got into Champions League. He's a very important part of that team. It's not going to be easy to pry him away unless he specifically comes out and says he wants to leave. So yeah, if I'm seeing 9-figure deals for him, then I'm not going to be very happy. No, but I mean,
Yeah.
those are the ins. The outs. The outs is a different conversation. I think Tierney. We all see that coming. I'd prefer him not to go to Newcastle or Aston Villa. I'd prefer him to go to a team outside the Premier League or someone worse than the two of them. But if that's who he has to go to for us to get money, then fair enough. But I did see that we're like dropping his valuation down to like 10 mil from what we were asking for last time. So if they get him for 10 mil, I think that's a steal. I know he's got injury problems and so on, but I still think he's a really good player if you get him fit. And if you think about it, like Newcastle, I mean, Newcastle and Aston Villa, there's not a lot of left back quality in the league. So I think we could get a bit more money for him. And then for Tomiyasu, I think that is crazy. I think that we must be just looking at him and Kiwior and seeing who's got more interest just to see if we can shift somebody. But if we let go of Tomiyasu, I will be disappointed because I think out of the two, he's better than Kiwior. Has shown that he can play in various different positions. Has a little bit of a bozo gene, has a little bit of a injury problem, but for the most part is I think more capable defender than Kiwior. So I think that's just us looking to see what we can get for who we've got. But I really hope we don't end up doing that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I pretty much agree with all your points. The only thing I'd say is with the Douglas Luiz one, he's a really good player, but profile-wise, I'd be a bit confused because he's not really like the Partey. He in that Villa team, Boubacar Kamara is more of the sitter, and Luiz is the one who goes up and down. So yeah, it would make me think the plan is to drop Declan Rice back into the six if you got Luiz, because I don't think that's his MO to play in the deep kind of ball winning position. He's more of the offensive side. But yeah, no, I agree with you on those ones. I think the Tierney one's inevitable, and yeah, Tomiyasu. Let's hope it's not actually legit because he's a really good player, and I think he's a good backup and good rotation, and sometimes even a good starting 11 player for you. So our links, to be honest, man, I'm not that bothered about the strikers that we've been linked with, whether it's Sesko, Xerxes. I think we were linked with Guirassy, who's kind of one of the older striker profiles that we've been linked with. I'd take any of them. And I know you've asked questions about what does that mean for Højlund. We need two strikers, regardless. Like let the best striker, the one who's in the most form, play. If that means Rasmus has got to sit on the bench for a few games because another striker's playing better, that's fine. He's still young. He's not like 25, 26, 27 in the prime of his career, needs to play every week. You've seen him dropped at the back end of the season for a little bit and coming off the bench, and he's done well. So he doesn't look like he's complaining either. So I'd take any of those strikers. I think they all offer something. Guirassy's probably. I think I was looking at. I got my stat bag the other day, and I was looking at like kind of their goals to expected goals to see whether they're plus or minus with a lot of strikers in the different leagues. And Guirassy's massively over his expected goals, which a lot of like football nerd stato guys say generally levels out. So you see it with Son. He's had loads of seasons where he's been in the wildly plus percent plus points on goals to expected goals, and then he has a dip like last season where he was the other way around. So that would probably concern me a little bit about Guirassy, in addition to the fact that he's a bit of a late bloomer. So you don't have too much evidence of him banging in goals, and in that sense, he's kind of just as much of a risk as a Xerxes or a Sesko, who have also had not too many seasons under their belts slapping in goals. So, but having said that, I'll take any of them. I think we're losing Tony Marshall, so Martial is finally exiting the club. So we need a second striker, whether they become starting striker or they rotate with Rasmus. I think we just need to get someone in the door. On the out, I mean, this kind of irks me. We talked about it a bit last week. Sancho's been going to be linked throughout the summer. I can tell Dortmund are going to start playing games and do the whole financial, victim stance and act like they don't have any money, while we know they're also, negotiating for Matson at the same time for like 30 million. So they've obviously got money. They just want their cake and eat it too. And they don't want to pay the fee we're asking for Sancho. Which, to be honest, I think the fee's not the unreasonable part. I think 40-50 million for Sancho is okay. I think the big problem is around his wages, isn't it? So I think his wages are like 300k or something like that, which I think is wildly over what he should be getting. So I think we're going to have a lot of stumbling blocks trying to move him, and I wouldn't be shocked if we do end up just doing a loan um, again and subsidising it, because I think it's going to be super difficult for us to shift him, and I don't think his form was quite as good as people made out. We talked about it last week, right? To justify someone going as crazy as we went. So yeah, the links are kind of. I think for United, the transfer stuff is a lot of kind of on the back burner, because we've got more. We've got a bigger issue to deal with, which is obviously stuff around the manager. So we'll get into that then. A lot of interesting news around Thomas Tuchel having meetings with Ineos and personally with Sir Jim Radcliffe, and then also then Fabrizio Romano reporting that he's ruled himself out of the running after those talks, and some conflicting stuff out there saying that Ineos actually ruled him out after that meeting and didn't want to proceed, but now his agents kind of putting the news out to the big super agents to try and obviously make Tuchel look better in the press. I personally don't want Thomas Tuchel. I think he's a good manager, but I think we talked about it last week and on previous pods. He's very much in that Conte, Mourinho ilk, where he does really well, potentially brings trophies, but then explode when he's on his way out. And I think we've had enough of those managers. We need someone who can come in and kind of toe the line in some way when it comes to dealing with the press and dealing with the squad and dealing with the ownership. And I think he's never proven to be that kind of character. So I'm not that disappointed that he's out of the running. I do actually think this does mean that Ten Hag's going to stay, because I felt like Tuchel was probably the biggest threat to his position now that McKenna's signed a new deal, and the options out there I think are not really compelling enough to make Ten Hag lose his job. So personally, I think Ten Hag's now going to remain. What do you think, Jods? Do you think this means that Ten Hag's going to stay?
I really don't know what to make of it, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the whole kind of Tuchel saga, I'm going to call it, is a bit of a weird one. I think they definitely would be speaking to him. I definitely think that he would be one of the managers to look into, but I don't know if he was, just based off of the whole idea of like a project, I don't know if he was ever going to be the right one to do that, right? Like a lot of the project type of, management hires that you see tend not to be those kinds of managers that have a wealth of experience. They tend to be kind of, let's go and get somebody young, somewhat obscure, but with good fundamentals, and let's try and kind of use him to kind of build us up from the bottom. And I think Tuchel was never going to be that kind of thing. I think he's kind of set in his ways, just like the other managers you talked about in terms of Conte and in terms of Mourinho. I don't necessarily think he's very progressive in his thought. And when I say that, what I mean is like he's going to expect it to be kind of an old school type of setup where he has a lot of say over a lot of different things. I think a lot of what you see with these project managers these days is that you actually get more of like an understanding that there's going to be others involved in the process, that you're going to have to work as part of like a unit to really be successful. With Tuchel, Conte and Mourinho, I think all of them, as well as many others, are very much of the ilk of like, I need to be involved in everything the club does and I need to have a say on everything and ideally be in the driver's seat for most of it. So I think that's probably why Tuchel wouldn't work with the whole setup that you're trying to build at United as well, because I think he is going to be, very involved and going to want to have his own thoughts and influence on what you do in terms of the transfer market, what you do in terms of other things too. So I don't think that was ever going to work. Like I felt like of all of those types of managers, Pochettino was really going to be your best bet of a manager that wants to be involved in transfers, sure, but is also relatively progressive in that he wants to build out youngsters. He wants to kind of fit in line with what you guys are trying to do in terms of buy young players, buy people with potential, don't go and buy stars, don't buy people on 300 grand a week, that kind of stuff. So the Tuchel part doesn't surprise me. I don't know what's going on with you and Pochettino now. If you're still going to be talking to him, or if there's anything going on at all. But if it's not Tuchel and if it's not McKenna and all these lot, I think Pochettino is the only other manager you're going to be properly looking at. So if it's not him, which it very well may not be, because he's just come out of a bit of a situation at Chelsea. I don't know if he's going to jump straight back into another situation with you guys. All of that points to the fact that Ten Hag will probably stay, but he's going to be it's like a last one left at the dance kind of thing. I feel harsh for him because it's kind of like very clear they've been looking for new managers. So I reckon he'll probably end up staying in the job. If I was him, I'd tell him to do one and say, I'm leaving you lot. Have that. I'll go and find a job at a better club. And you lot can take that for trying to look above me and look elsewhere while I'm still in the job.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think there was a lot of hope when Ineos came in. I mean, there was skepticism too, I have to admit. Obviously, a lot of people were upset that we didn't get the full takeover that we wanted, and Glazers out and all that stuff. But I think when you started to see Ineos making moves and, putting in the football structure that we've been dying for so long, there was a bit of momentum building and a bit of a hope train started getting going. And I think this manager debacle has kind of definitely slowed that down, because I don't think they've dealt with it well. I think all of this like open conversations with other managers, it's not going to make Ten Hag feel good about his job security going forward. And if I was him, I'd also feel extremely disrespected because, all right, we had a bad league season, but he's come out 2 trophies in 2 seasons, Champions League 1 year, some obstacles and challenges that, played their part in year 2 league-wise not going so well. But it's not fair to treat him the way they have, I think. So I wouldn't be shocked if something along the lines that you just said happened. And maybe Ten Hag stays for 1 season, but his contract's running out. He's got 1 year left. And even if he does really well, and let's say he does well, he still flips the V's at Ineos and says, you know what, I'm gonna go somewhere else, and somewhere where, the people appreciate me and treat me with some form of respect. And it is kind of harsh because he was linked with Bayern for a while before they went for Vincent Company, and the rumours were that Ten Hag turned it down because he wanted to stay at United and try and see this job through. And if that is the case, I know Bayern are a bit of a crazy house as well right now, but it's not really fair how that's worked out and shaken out for him. I think it's extremely harsh on him, and I know people may have different opinions about his talent as a coach or a manager, but I think we can all agree it's not the way they've gone around this and about this. Ineos is not the way to go forward, and I think they're definitely going to have to try and improve how they do this in the future. If they want the club to be successful, because everything starts from the top. And for as much good as they've done recruiting these best-in-class people in all these different positions, the way they've gone about this particular recruitment process has left a lot to be desired. So I agree, though. I think Ten Hag will end up staying, and I don't think they'll opt for Poch regardless. I think it was probably McKenna. Once McKenna ruled himself out, it was let's keep talking to Tuchel. Now that this has happened with Tuchel, I think they'll just end up staying with Ten Hag. I'd be extremely shocked if they went and sacked him and brought someone else on board. But let's go on to your manager then. A lot of news in the press that he's going to sign a contract extension, make himself one of the highest paid Premier League managers in the league. Do you think that's going to happen? Would you be happy if he signed an extension? What's your general feeling around it?
I think I'd like to see it happen just because of everything I've seen quoted about him and his belief of like the 5 different stages he wants to see Arsenal go through, and him believing that we're currently in, I think it was like phase 2, phase 3 in terms of, his overall plan. He seems like a guy that is wanting to really see it through, in my opinion, right? Like he's shown that he's pretty dedicated to the club. He's shown that he really wants to go on and build with this squad. I don't think you go through all of the stuff that he's gone through and, taken some of the measures he's taken in terms of, corny stuff he's done on Amazon series and stuff like that. I don't think you behave like that unless you're trying to really build something with the team, right? I think those are long-term activities that you get into to try and really build rapport with the team. So I think he's really dedicated to us. I do think he probably will sign a contract extension. soon. I can't say specifically when. I do think there'll be a little bit of a look to see, like, all right, are we doing what we need to do in the transfer market? If we are, then sure, I'll go ahead and sign one. But if we start pulling back and saying, oh, can't do this, can't do that, maybe he says, you know what, I'm not gonna sign something. Then we'll wait and see what happens. So I think it does depend on, whether the Arsenal board and kind of Edu and all of those lot kind of keep up their end of the bargain and keep doing what they signed up to do with Arteta from the get go. And I think if he sees that we are going to do that, which I think we will, then I don't see why he would go and, sign or not sign a contract extension. The only clubs I could see him ever going to at the moment don't really need a manager, or they're in the mud, right? Like I could see him going back to Barcelona one day, because I think that attraction and that connection for a lot of Barcelona kind of former players and so on is very, very strong, and it does always tend to pull them back at some point. But I just think they're too much in the mud that he's not going to want to take that on, especially with what's happening at Real Madrid as well. That's going to be a really tough job. And it's clear that the kind of board and chairman and all that at Barcelona are a bit nuts, right? And how they've just treated Xavi. I'm sure he's looking at that and thinking, I'm not sure that's the right time to be going there. So, I mean, outside of that, I don't know if there's any other clubs that would really pull him at this point in time to say, you know what, I want to leave Arsenal. So, yeah, I would be very happy to have him stay. I think he's the best that we've got, and I've got a lot of respect for everything that he's done. I know it hasn't, given us what we needed yet in terms of a major honour, but I don't see why, if we don't keep following his plan and the club's plan, why we couldn't get one in the next couple of years. So, yeah, I'll take him. I'll keep on taking him. I'll keep on being happy regardless if we come second, because he's done far better than, a lot of other managers could have done. So I'll take him.
Arteta in. That's the
of course.
That's the clip from that. All right, I hear you, John. I agree. I think it would be crazy to not renew. And it will probably just be a timing thing.
Yeah.
But let's get on to one of our special segments then for today's episode. We're going to quickly delve into all things England. So this past week, the final 23-man squad was confirmed. I'll run through them really quickly now. It's Jordan Pickford, Dean Henderson and Aaron Ramsdale in goal. And then in defence, we've got Lewis Dunk, Joe Gomez, Mark Gahey, Ezri Konsa, Luke Shaw, John Stones, Kieran Trippier, Kyle Walker in defence. In midfield, interestingly, Trent has been put there. So you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Conor Gallagher, Kobbie Mainoo, Declan Rice, Adam Wharton. And then in attack, interestingly again, Jude Bellingham's been put here. So you've got Jude, Jared Bowen, Eberici Eze, Phil Foden, Anthony Gordon, Harry Kane, Cole Palmer, Bukayo Saka, Ivan Toney, and Ollie Watkins. So the 7 players dropped from this crazy inflated squad he decided to go with is James Trafford, Jared Branthwaite, Harry Maguire, Jarrell Kwanzaa, Curtis Jones, James Maddison, and Jack Grealish. So I think there were a lot of eyebrows raised with the players dropped. It's quite a few what we would consider Gareth Southgate favourites in there, as well as some really good up-and-coming players. Like, I'm thinking Jared Branthwaite, for example, was a bit of a shock that he got dropped. Do you agree with the players dropped, first of all? And do you think that there's anyone missing that maybe he should have taken that maybe hasn't been discussed in this wider group?
I've got a feel for Branthwaite. I think Branthwaite, when I look at those other centre-backs in there, I feel like it's a bit harsh. I mean, like the Lewis Dunks, the Gomez. I like Guehi, I like Konsa, but still, I know that they haven't been like world-class outstanding. And I think Branthwaite really has had like a breakthrough season for a not very good team, and he's been a critical part of like keeping them in the Premier League. So I think it's a little bit harsh on him. I could have seen him coming in for somebody like Dunk, or maybe a Gomez, depending on whether we're looking for this left back, centre back kind of thing. But I think Branthwaite should feel a little bit hard done by. Selfishly, I know it's probably a crazy shout, but I think Kwanzaa has been really good this season, and he looks like the kind of player that deals with pressure really, really well. I don't know if he's been hyped up as much as all of the others. I think people kind of forgotten about him, but I think you said on this podcast previously that he came in and made Konate look like Konate is not all that good. And that's talking
Yeah,
about Konate as a starting centre-back essentially for France, right? For the most part,
yeah.
over William Saliba, which is absolutely mental, but that's another point to talk about another day. But I feel like Kwanzaa's, no one's really talking about it, but I feel like it's harsh, man. I feel like Kwanzaa should be definitely over Dunk. I feel like I would take him. He's young. He's been training and playing next to the best centre-back we've got in the league right now, apparently. You know, I don't see why we wouldn't give him a chance over somebody like Dunk, who has been part of a pretty poor Brighton team this year. So outside of that, I think Jones, Maddison, Grealish, you can't be complaining. All three of you. I mean, maybe Jones is a little bit of a chance to say, why can't I get in over a player like Gallagher or somebody else? But I think in terms of profile, he's not really similar. And I think the players that he is similar to in terms of profile are better than him and have been better than him this season. So out of the attacking players, really, I think Jones is the only one with half a shout to be upset. But Maddison's been poor, and it apparently doesn't have a great attitude. Grealish also been poor, probably still drunk. Like there's a lot of issues. So, and I think Maguire. The weirdest thing is, right, this is probably the time where he's most deserving to get into the England team,
Yeah,
and he's
I
not in the
agree.
England team. The other times is like he's not been deserving of it and he gets in.
Yeah.
Now he's probably most deserving that he's ever been. Not to say he actually deserves it, but he's been left out. So it's a weird one, but again, I think he's had his opportunities, and it's just karma now at this point, isn't it, for him?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hear you. I think Jared Branthwaite should feel quite disappointed, and Kwanzaa. I think they both have a really good case to be put forward, to be in that squad ahead of Lewis Dunk. I think the way it's fallen is Maguire's injured. He's come out and said that. Um, and I think that's the only reason why he's been dropped. We know Southgate loves him. And like you said, there's no form questions around him. He's actually been decent this season. And for once, I think we'd all probably not throw our hands up if he was in the squad. And I think because that experience has been taken away because of his injury, I think Lewis Dunk has got the call purely based on that. Because I think if you take Dunk out, Stones is pretty much the only centre back with, some age, some experience, some kind of professional nous. I think Joe Gomez. I know Gomez, Gehi, and Konza have all been playing for a good while, but in terms of England's setup, I don't think any of them have as much experience as Maguire. And in terms of just games played, I think Dunk probably still played a lot more games than them. So I think that's the reason why he's been included. But yeah, I would have chucked Dunk out. I think he's a rubbish version of Maguire. If I'm completely honest, he's maybe slightly better on the ball, but he makes absolute blunders and he has a massive bozo gene. So if he's in the squad, he better not get any minutes. And I would still trust Stones, Gehi, Konza, Gomez over him in that centre back position. So yeah, I hear your opinions on the defensive calls. I agree on Jones as well. I mean, the fact that Mainu and Wharton have got in means that they've really impressed Southgate. I think Mainu was a shoo-in because of the last international break. He played quite a bit in the friendlies. He's obviously coming off the back of a big performance in the FA Cup final. I guess he's proven himself a bit more than Wharton. So Wharton's the real one where it goes, wow, Maddison, Jones have both been dropped to keep Wharton in. Because I know Bellingham's been included in the attacking section, but he can play in midfield as well. So the
Yeah.
idea is that they believe in Wharton more than Maddison and Jones, which is a
Yeah.
huge call, and it shows what they really think about Adam Wharton. So big him up. Well done. Crystal Palace have got the most representation in this England squad. 4 players, more than any other team. So that tells you they're doing something right in South London, right? But yeah, the Grealish one I think it's the right call, but I'm surprised he did it. That's the only one I'm like, because Maguire's the injury takes away the surprise element. I think the other 5, like you said, Maddison, maybe people could be surprised, but he's been rubbish for the 3 or 4 months of the season. So I'm not shocked he's been dropped. And he's going against Gordon, Palmer, Eze, Foden, who've been playing out
All
their
in great
skin.
form.
Yeah, been playing out their skin for either the entire season or at least the last 3 or 4 months when Madison's been going the other direction. But the shock is that Grealish has been dropped because I agree with it, but I'm surprised Southgate has decided that because it just feels like he would go with the player again who's got some more experience playing in the squad.
Age.
Yeah, he's coming, in big moments for City. But it makes sense. Drop him. He's barely played, and when he has played, he's done nothing. And I don't think he deserves a spot on the squad. So, weirdly enough, apart from Dunk, and even the Dunk when I kind of understand the experience angle, I can't argue with any of these decisions. For once, I actually almost completely agree with Southgate. So, let's see how we do, eh?
I think there's a clear indication from him that he's going to try and play a little bit different from how he usually does, though, because from my opinion, like Grealish, the fact that he dropped him, right? Grealish, in my opinion, is quite, it sounds really ridiculous, but like quite a defensive attacker in terms of the fact that he really keeps, because of Pep, he takes care of the ball, right? He recycles. He doesn't always drive forward. He kind of cuts in. He's not like gung-ho, go for it every 5 seconds kind of thing, right? So the fact that we're not playing him and the fact that we've got like the people that are replacing him are like the Gordons of the world, the Bowens, the Ezes, who are really driving forward type of players, right? Kind of signals to me that Southgate's going to want to play his, like, let's say 3 attackers plus Watkins or, plus Kane, sorry, like the striker role. He's going to really want to play them bombing forward. And the fact that he's chosen Wharton over a player like Jones or Maddison shows me that he wants his 2 midfielders to be more like not defensively minded, but to be more both sides of the ball. So I think from my point of view, I think he's trying to maybe he won't start with that every game, but I think the fact that he's included Wharton as well, who's quite a defensive midfielder, also shows to me that like he is trying to build up another way to play where he's got like really gung-ho attacking, left wing, right wing, cam striker, and then have like a Rice, Bellingham, Wharton, Mainu kind of not all gung-ho going forward all the time type of players. So I think it might be a signal that he's going to try and play a little bit different from how he's played previously, which kind of makes less sense to me why he didn't go and then consider maybe Rashford a little bit more, because Rashford would be the ideal type of like real gung-ho type of attacker that's just going to dribble straight at a player. And I think you saw in the game against Iceland, Gordon actually did offer, even though there was no end product, Gordon ended up being one of our better outlets on the pitch, right? Just driving at the right back over and over again. So it could be, to me, it might be a good sign. And that's why I also can't argue with this pick too much, because I think like it does, to me, show like a good rounding of different ways that we could play with all these players on the pitch. So I quite like it, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going for it. And that also signals that he's probably done after this tournament regardless.
Pretty much.
He's doing what everyone kind of has been criticising him for not doing. So, let's see how it goes. What did you make of the England? We don't have to chat about too much, but 2 friendlies done now. Bosnia, we won 3-0. England 3, Bosnia 0. Eze was amazing in that game, by the way, which I think probably helped solidify his pick. And then you had the very strange and disappointing 1-0 defeat to Iceland. What did you make of them? Because I guess it's a tale of 2 friendlies, isn't it? Really different performances.
Yeah, it was weird. The Iceland game, I think, obviously, he we didn't play maybe all of our best players, obviously, right? Like notable omissions like Bellingham and so on. But that was a really disappointing performance. Like, we didn't really show any want to win that match. And it seems like it's the worst way to go into a Euros. Like, I know that people are going to say, oh, it's a friendly, he's testing stuff out. But more than anything, it's also an opportunity to show the rest of the world or the rest of the countries going into the Euros, like we're gonna come in and batter all of you lot, and that we're on good form. So don't kind of overlook us, because we're going to be really hard to beat. And to lose to Iceland, man, they're not even in the Euros, and we're getting beaten by them. And I'm not even going to say like they didn't deserve it. Like, based off of that performance, they deserved to beat us. We were trash. So yeah. Overall, really disappointing performance. The match against Bosnia is how I expect us to perform, even when we're playing not our first choice players. Like, we are first team, second team, third team a better team than they are, right? I think you could go down to fourth, fifth selection type players, and I still think we should be giving them a good game. So the fact that we couldn't beat a team like Iceland with our second or third type of string players is just stinks. And then on top of that, you got like Stones getting injured, you got like all these different things. You know, I don't know how that shaped up, but it just kind of like, at least go and win the game if you're going to go and sacrifice the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky though. I will say, I think all the bigger nations in these couple of warm-up friendlies have had, unexpected draws, or a defeat here or there. Because I think a lot of them are playing teams that are either not qualifying, haven't qualified, sorry, for the tournament, or are in different federations or whatever. So they're kind of just testing things out. So I'm not that disappointed around. Well, obviously it's disappointing to lose to Iceland at home. I don't think that's definitely not the best momentum to go into the tournament with. But you've seen lots of teams go into tournaments off the back of either disappointing draws or defeats. So I don't think it's no massive alarm bells need to go off. But it's not ideal. And then obviously the other thing to talk about is all of this stuff going on in the media here in the UK. Bukayo Saka, for context, only played 24 minutes in that game, came on as a second half sub. I thought he looked all right. I thought he looked pretty lively. Don't think his performance was bad. Don't think he did anything negative whatsoever. Come the Saturday morning, his face was splattered all over our English newspapers, being used to, kind of as part of a criticism of the defeat to Iceland. And you've seen a really strong reaction by a lot of prominent black footballers or ex-footballers, managers involved, or people involved in the game, condemning this unnecessary use of Bukayo Saka's imagery in the defeat, and kind of pointing to how it can be damaging to the African and Caribbean communities here in the UK. What did you make of it? First of all, did you read into it? Did you think it was something that was calculated? Do you think it's just them being kind of a bit negligent by kind of willy nilly using Saka's imagery, or kind of what's your general take on this discussion point at the moment?
I feel like if it was one time and they had never done anything questionable before, then I could kind of brush it off and say, yeah, you might have just been negligent in that case. But I think in this case, anything that was negligence is gross mismanagement and gross misrepresentation, because from my point of view, they should know the situation of what happened to Saka previously. They should know the situation of what happened to a lot of those, those three players that got battered at the end of the last tournament where we ended up losing, right? So they should know the context of that and know what happened off the back of that, and try and have a little bit more sense to say, what, actually, let's think about this a little bit more carefully, right? And then on top of that, just from the point of view of like showing disappointment, or showing a player that actually didn't play well, or showing the manager that didn't perform well, it just doesn't make sense why you'd show a guy that was on for 24 minutes. Like that from no angle does it seem like this was the right thing to do, right? Like if it was like some outstandingly good opportunity for a picture, or like something that was just so good that they couldn't miss the opportunity to put it on the front page, like fair enough, right? Like if it's in a clown suit doing a jiggle or whatever else, fine, go ahead and do it. But like the picture wasn't that outstanding. It's not like it was some great opportunity that they couldn't find another picture that was better of something else, or at least like, on the same level of photography. So from that point of view, again, it just stinks. So I'm trying to play devil's advocate and think on both sides of it, but from every angle, it just seems like a stupid thing to do, right? And like, I don't know what undertones there might be, because I don't know any of these people and I don't know any of these organizations well enough. Obviously, I've seen things in the news about how they can behave. So my general reaction is to say there's something going on here. But at the very base, at the very minimum, it's just doing your job terribly, right? And then on top of that, you can layer in undertones, you can layer in all these other things of like racist journalists and racist publications. You layer all that on top of it, and it doesn't sound ridiculous to say that that's what happened. But at the very base, this is poor performance of your job. So, yeah, I think it stinks. I think that the English media has stank for a long time. I think that they continue to be, especially in a lot of these like kind of cheap publications. There continues to be this very Brexit FC type of mindset. I think that they will continue to be like this, and I think they've done it for such a long time now that it's almost not surprising that they've gone and done it again. Still not acceptable, and I think everyone should call it out, and we should move to a point where some of these cheap, crappy papers actually start fixing up a little bit more. But from my point of view, I want to see the end of all of them. I don't understand why they're even around anymore. No one buys newspapers. No one likes their journalism. Sack them off, man. They stink.
Yeah, not to laugh about quite a serious subject, but I agree with you, man. I just think it's kind of driven my internal conflict when supporting England as a team, and it's not really the team's fault. I think it's been kind of the way that the media has portrayed the team, and some of the kind of extremist fans that we have here in England that support the team so vehemently have kind of made it a really hard thing for me to get behind the team, because it represents the nation and it also represents our media. And to be honest, this is just another example of, we can talk about negligence, poor performance, poor journalism, but it's definitely, by now we've reached a level where we have to call it what it is, which is there's some real racist undertones involved in a lot of this portrayal of the England team, especially in defeat. I'm not talking in victory, because when we do well, we're all celebrating everyone and everything's beautiful. But when things go slightly left, we know who's going to get the blame. We saw it after the Euros 2021 final, when sadly, it was very clear and obvious who would get the blame because of how the match went and the penalties being missed. But don't get me wrong, if Saka, Rashford, Sancho had all scored those penalties but had some sort of other incident in the game, they would have been scapegoated, because that's generally the trend that we see in this country when our team doesn't achieve goals that we believe we should be. So yeah, it's not a good omen, because unless we win the Euros, I can almost guarantee one of our black or mixed race players will find some way into the frame for being someone to be blamed. I also saw player ratings for that game where I thought Mainu did okay. I don't think it was one of his best games, but he did all right. And they were criticising him for the goal, which he had played
and
no
you can
part
watch
in.
the replay, and he was literally
Played
nowhere
no
near any
part
of
in.
it.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Kyle Walker
And
out of position drags our whole defense into like the no man's land, and then they blame Mainu for it. It was ridiculous.
exactly,
It's clear that
exactly.
journalist is not paying attention,
Yeah, or he has an agenda. Because I mean,
or he
and
has an agenda.
I am a huge Declan Rice fan, but even Declan Rice was pushed up way more on that
Yeah.
attack than Mainu was, and yet he says Declan Rice deserves a better partner than Mainu. Like I'm not saying all the media is that way. There are some extremely talented, very fair-minded journalists involved in our media across all sectors, but unfortunately, there are also some people who have their own feelings and their own opinions and their own prejudices, who somehow manage to influence that, the way these images are chosen and the way, some of our media is run. And unfortunately for Bukayo, he was on the receiving end of this. And like you said, you would have thought him, Rashford and Sancho would be ring fenced and protected, after what happened in the Euros. But yeah, clearly that was something that had a time bar on it, and we've passed that time, and now it's open season again. So it's super disappointing, and I just hope that us as a football fan audience don't fall for the bait, and we don't start looking and being influenced by this kind of portrayal of our players, and we get behind the team, and if we lose, we just take it on the chin and we don't look for anyone to blame, and we support the players that are struggling with the result. And but yeah, super disappointing. And yeah, I've seen a lot of outlets and content creators call it out, and I applaud them all. Versus had a really good couple of posts on social media, condemning this stuff. Darren Lewis, who's one of the best football writers and sports writers and just general journalists out there, also wrote something really poignant on it. So I thought we had to touch on that before we finished that England segment, because we love Saka as well. Obviously you do, but even me as a United fan love Saka. He didn't deserve any of that. And like you said, 24 minutes. Come on, guys. Come on.
And I mean, the last thing I'll say on it is it draws me back to the thing that Onana said in his interview quite recently around like, you've got all these young players, right? Like, and in every other industry and just in society generally, we always try to protect young people, right? Because we know that they're vulnerable to do things that experience would tell them not to do, right? And you know, the legal system protects them. We protect a lot of people, for the most part, young people, from getting absolutely battered in the media, right? Apart from certain races, and then in the case of football, just in general, we don't like to protect young people. So from my point of view, it's like in line with what Onana said. You've got people like Kane, you've got Rice, you've got players on that pitch that have been there for a long time, right? And they're older. They've been in the football game for a long time as well. Why is it we're calling out Bukayo Saka, who's still a very young person? Why is it we're calling out a lot of the younger players, especially the ones that are, you know, ethnic minorities? Why is it that we're okay with not treating them as if they're young, right? And why is it we're okay with not protecting them? But if it's somebody else, we don't care. You know, if it's a young Foden, no one's calling him out for being absolutely crap all the time when he was crap and when he didn't show up. But now we want to do, you know, with ethnic minorities, we treat them like as if, you know, they're not kids and they're not young players, and we don't protect them at all. When you've got so many older, more experienced players on that pitch that you could be calling out, along with a manager who's had questions around him for a long time and who is overall in control of who he picks and how we play. So it's reminiscent of a lot of other problems we have in society today, especially in the UK. And it's a shame, because it's turning people off from wanting to support their country. And in this case, not even their country, but their country's football team and their national football team, which I have pride in. I still remember being like 11, 12 years old and younger, and like the whole school shutting down so that we could watch the Euros or we could watch the World Cup or whatever else. And if we did well, everyone would be so happy. And it's turning people off from wanting to support the England football team, because our media, pundits, we just can't get out of our own way and realize that we're here to support the country, not to condemn it and critique it all the time, which is just so in line with the media today, right? Their entire job is sensationalizing and critiquing everything and not trying to support anything that we do. So I would just say to anyone out there, you know, just try and separate the team from the rest of the media and the other things that are going on in the country, because that team of young players deserves to win something. They're very good players, arguably the best team in the tournament. We deserve something, and we deserve support for them.
Yeah, and they're united as well. They're doing everything they can, and in terms of the mood around the team, we haven't seen an England team have this kind of mood, and that's the one thing I would give Gareth Southgate credit for. He's played his part in creating that atmosphere, and we need to, like you said, get behind that and try and not let the media, not let the pundits, not let the other things going on around distract from the fact that we love a lot of these players that have been picked. We support them, and we think they can do really well. But yeah, really well said, John. So let's get on to the next segment then, the final segment. So just like we did the special segment on the Euros 2024 predictions last week, we're going to do the Copa America 2024 predictions. That's also going on this summer. For context, I think it's the first one where they've merged CONCACAF nations, so the North and Central American and Caribbean nations, into Copa America, which I think makes a lot of sense. They should have been in there from the get-go, you know what I mean?
Makes it a lot of it like a much tastier tournament, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, there's no reason to separate them. I think you just got to merge them together. So that means countries like Mexico, Jamaica, Panama, Mexico are all in this tournament, which, like you said, enriches the tournament and gives it an added element of interest. So like we did last week, we'll go through the winners, the dark horses, the flops, the player of the tournament. I got a little bit of heat for predicting Germany, and so a couple of people, called out some questionable stats. Muppet, but we'll get through those now. So we'll go through the winners. John, who do you think are going to be the winners of Copa America 2024? Are you going to go predictable, or are you going to go left field?
I'm going Brazil.
Hey,
I'm going it based off of who I want to win, and who I don't want to win. I I don't want Argentina to keep winning things, right? You won a World Cup, that's enough. Give the Brazilians a chance now. But also just because I really like the Brazil team, man. I think they've got a lot of like, it's not like a Galactico type of team. I get that, right? It's not comparable in a lot of quality circumstances, but compared to the old teams. But I really love the youth in that team. Obviously, I've got to support my boy Martinelli and Gabriel, and I hope they do really well. So I'm going for Brazil. They haven't been in the best form, but I'm hoping they turn it around.
Yeah, I mean the storyline of Endrick winning the Copa America in his first tournament at the age of like 17 or something is nuts. But I kind of love it. And I've gone the same. I've also gone Brazil, and I have to be honest, it is also a bit driven by who I want to win and who I don't want to win. And no offense to all our Argentinian friends and people that may be listening to this, but not a massive fan of your team. And yeah, I was a fan of Messi getting his fairy tale winning the World Cup storyline. I like that. I think he, would have been a bit of a tragedy if he didn't get a big tournament like that. But obviously there's England Argentina rivalry, but there's also just so much S-housery involved in Argentina. I remember the Argentina Netherlands game in the World Cup was one of the best games I watched ever, just because you had the Dutch team Dutch people are so direct and so proper and correct about everything, and you had the Argentinians just doing the opposite, flopping everywhere, doing little niggly things all the time, and it was like such a beautiful, styles make fights kind of game. Don't get me wrong, I was supporting the Dutch on it, so I was quite disappointed when they didn't get it over the line. But I think Brazil have got to do it, man. They've really struggled recently in big tournaments, and they've generally been kind of in the flops category in most tournaments that we've seen recently. So I'm hoping they're going to be able to turn it around, and I think they've got some world class players, man. Alisson's there; he's the best goalie in the world, in my opinion, or at least one of the top three. Vinny Jr.'s coming off the back of another Champions League. Got Gabriel in defence, really, really handy. You've got, some really good players in that team. So I hope that they win it. But, I wouldn't be shocked if they also ended up being a flop, to be honest. They're kind of that kind of team, aren't they? Let's get into the dark horses then. Just to clarify once again, this is not only dark horses to win the tournament, but dark horses to go quite far. Who have you gone for?
I reckon you're going to question me on this one again, but I'm going for Colombia, and I know that I think they're like 4 favourites to win the whole tournament. But I think the gap between Argentina, Brazil, and pretty much everyone else is always quite large in terms of expectations for this tournament. And I think Colombia have just been on crazy form. Like if you look at their last 5 games, mate, like they've been impeccable, right? They absolutely battered the USA. They beat Spain. They've got some really good kind of names on their record recently, and I think, I don't know, despite the fact that I think their team is not man for man the best team I've ever seen, I just think that they've got a good chance of surprising and upsetting a lot of people. I could see them getting into the final and possibly even winning it, depending on how well Brazil and Argentina turn up.
So I'll allow it. I think I agree with you completely. I think the gap between Brazil and Argentina and the rest of the field is quite big. So I think picking any of the rest of the field would constitute as a dark horse. And I agree with you. I think Colombia are going to be a really strong team in this tournament. We saw them live in direct at the London Stadium when they played Spain, and they really impressed me in that tournament. So I don't think that's a crazy shout. I've gone for one of their biggest rivals though. And my good mate Jose is not going to be too happy about this, but I've done it anyway, and I've gone for Ecuador. So I actually think Ecuador, they're not going to win it, but I wouldn't be shocked if they made it to the semis or potentially even the final and took a couple of big scalps. They've got quite a few handy players knocking about through Europe at the moment. They've obviously got Moises Caicedo at Chelsea. They've got Estepinian at Brighton, who I think is a really underrated left back. They've also got a couple of wonder kids knocking about, and the boy who goes by Kendry Paez, who I think is going to Chelsea next season, but they bought like 2 seasons ago and he was like 14 or 15 or something like that, has been absolutely lighting it up in South America. And I think he's played recently for the national team and done really, really well. So I think he's going to really drive them, as well as those other players I mentioned, to a really good tournament. So I'm going to go for Ecuador. Don't kill me, any Colombian friends we have out there, but yeah, I just think they're going to have a really good tournament. Let's go on to flops then, John. Who do you reckon are going to be your flops? Can I guess by your Brazil pick who you're going to go for, or is it someone else?
No. I have a hard time saying that Argentina are going to be flops if they get to the final, right? Because their expectation is so high on them. And I do think they'll still do well in the tournament. I think they'll still go far. I just don't think they'll win it. My choice for flops is a team who have gassed themselves up over the last, I don't know, forever, and continue to think that they're a very good team despite being quite terrible. And I'm going to choose the US. I think they're getting knocked out in the group stages quite embarrassingly. I can see them finishing third, fourth in that group and going absolutely nowhere.
Oh, bro, I was so tempted when I saw the groups, and I saw recently they got pumped by Colombia, and some of their pundits and stuff talking about their chances. I thought, oh god, this is crying out for the USA. But I just thought, will it really be a massive flop? I mean, if they got knocked out of, was it the Gold Cup? Is what used to be like the North and Central American kind of continental trophy, I think it would be a shock. But having joined the field in South America and Copa America, I think I agree with you. They might go out in the group, but whether that would be a major flop or just kind of what we expect of the USA in this field, I don't know. But I've actually gone for Uruguay. And people, you might think I'm crazy, and some people who, the geezer who on TikTok said I was a bit nuts for picking Germany is probably not going to like this one, because they've been cooking in their last few friendlies. But number one, I don't believe in their star players. I think Darwin Núñez is rubbish. Which is not only the Liverpool thing. I just generally think he's just like, him and Nicholas Jackson are jokes of strikers. They can be decent as wingers, but when you play them as strikers, I just think you might as well just pack it in. And then also they've got Bielsa, and I just feel the way Bielsa plays football, unless you're Leeds, you're going to suffer, because none of the players, even Leeds suffered at the end. I just don't think they're going to be able to pull it off for a whole tournament, and they might start off strong and do decent at the beginning, but I think their expectations are probably semis minimum, considering the strength of the pool, and I don't think they'll do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they went out in the groups. I wouldn't be surprised if they, took a big shock L in the quarterfinals or something like that. I just don't think this Bielsa experiment's going to work. And I like a few of their players. Like, I don't mind Bentancur. I think he's a good player. I like Valverde, but yeah. Some of the other players they've got leave a lot to be desired, I think. So I'm going to go Uruguay. Let's go for player of the tournament then. John, let's wrap this segment up. Who are you going for?
Going for Vinny Jr. I think I wanted to go for like a narrative in terms of somebody like, I don't know, Martinelli or Endrick or something like that. But I just think Vinny Jr., man, he's probably, at this point, maybe one of the leaders to get the Ballon d'Or at the end of the year. And I think this would contribute in the whole narrative, I guess, to him winning it. Imagine if he goes out there, has one of the best international tournaments of his lives, Brazil win the Copa America. I think he's got to win it. So I'm gonna go for Vinny Jr. I think I've seen he's got like braids now or whatever. I don't know what's going on with his Barnet, but I've got to say I still think he'll be able to do it. So questionable Barnet, great player.
Yeah, to be honest, I think there was like a funny meme of Vinny Jr. a few months back where he was like standing in front of someone else who had a similar kind of had dreads, and it looked like Vinny Jr. had dreads, but it was actually just another player who was standing directly behind him. So when I saw the pictures of him in training, I thought it was just that again. I thought there was another player behind him with dreads, and he was just standing in front of them, and it was like an optical illusion. And then I actually saw him running and the dreads moving along with him. And I was like, oh my God, what have you done? There's no way you've grown those dreads.
Exactly. So he's done extensions on his Barnet as well. That's the other thing, yeah.
Oh, Brazilians and their hairdos, man. They've got to be one of the most flamboyant kind of hairstyle dons in the world. Like they all go big. But you know what? He's a class player, so I'm not hating that shout. So I was tempted to go for obviously a player either in the team that I think is going to win the tournament in Brazil or one of the dark horses one in Ecuador. I was really tempted to go for Kenji Pius, but I think he'll probably have like the rookie of the tournament or like the breakout player of the tournament or something like that, and less so the player overall. But the player I'm going to go for is a bit of a fan favorite for me at the moment, and he plays in the Europa League winning team in central midfield, and he goes by the name of Edison. So I think he's going to like solidify his position in this team. And I don't think he's going to score a bundle of goals or anything like that, but I think he's going to be part of that midfield that really creates a strong foundation for that Brazil team to go on and win the tournament. And this might be a bit of the hipster in me, the bit of Crouch End in me, but I think he's going to be the player of the tournament, and he's going to really push that team on, because I mean, what I've seen of him, he looks like a really transformational player, and Brazil don't have Casemiro. They don't have a couple of other they're kind of like regulars in midfield, and I think he's going to fill that void. So I'm going to go for Edison. All right, that's our Copa America 2024 predictions sorted. We've gone quite similar, but a few differences in there. Let's hope our winners win, because we've both gone for the same team. But yeah, let's wrap up the pod here, Jonts. A really good episode, and yeah, we'll speak to you guys next week.
Cheers, Ant. Cheers, everyone.
Sports Social Podcast Network.